Let me tell you a little story about the first venture I had up in the Hieroglyphic Canyon. When I arrived in Apache Junction, one of the first places I happened to come across was the Apache Land Movie Ranch Studios. It was located at the base of the Superstition Mountain out Peralta Road. This was perfect. I was allowed to step back into the 1800s, crack out of the box, and with a vengeance. I loved it. I soon wangled my way into working, if you want to call it work, with the gunfighters and participating in their shows. I also learned that the trail to those petroglyphs we talked about could be accessed right off the Apache land property. After I was at Apache land for a little while, I met an old Indian gentleman by the name of Papa Jim Fire Eagle. He was 77 years young that particular year, but you'd have never guessed it to look at him. He was spry as he could be and sharp as a tack. Papa Jim, Little Beaver, and Little Beaver's wife, Snowflower, came to see the petroglyphs. Jim had never seen them, and he wanted to see them just as badly as I did. As we traveled up the relatively flat trail, he explained how to spot where camps had been, and dammit piles. Now, dammit piles, we all have those. If we've ever done any kind of craft at all, you've had those situations where you're working with something, and all of a sudden you say, oh, damn it, and you throw it down, and you do it over again. What you threw on the ground, that's called your dammit pile. Well, the Indian did the same thing if he was making arrowheads or whatever, or pottery or whatever, and it broke or something, he just, damn it, and he threw it in a pile. And they became known as dammit piles. Now, once we arrived at the canyon, Jim was like a hungry dog in a meat locker. He scrutinized every one of the writings. He said, a lot. He just smiled, that all-knowing smile. And then we took a lunch break. He never explained anything. He just, And then we took that lunch break. Snowflower made some drawings and notes as we all sat eating our lunch, which consisted of traditional Indian cuisine, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that we'd taken with us. During our conversation, I mentioned that my wife's, at the time, her name was Whipple. Now, Whipple was kind of interesting because there was a Lieutenant Whipple at Fort Whipple out here in this area. And I said that she was part Indian. I said, it's kind of interesting because Lieutenant Whipple was back here when all the Indians and the cavalry was fighting, and they was carrying on like that and shooting and killing each other and carrying on. And Jim looked at me with a kind of a twinkle in his eye, and he said, well, it just goes to show you all them Indians wasn't fighting, was they? Well, that trip had been quite an adventure. After returning to Apache land, after the sandwiches, and it was starting to get dark, so we came back to the movie ranch, and we sat around drinking a pot of coffee. It was a Papa Jim pot of coffee. And his coffee was just black as Cooley's dog. I tell you, it was just black, black, black coffee. You could tell when it was done because you could float a spoon in it. It was it was tough stuff, but it wasn't bad. We got through it. After that, we called it a day, and I went home. My head was just spinning with all the wonderful things I had learned that day, things I never had any idea about. Now, just because it's the nature of the beast, in Apache Junction, it doesn't take long to get all wrapped up in the Lost Dutchman gold and treasure legends. They seem to permeate out of every rock, crevice, and cactus, and any old-timer surrounding this area. They're always shrouded by the mountains that you can see in untold secrets. And I was no different in that regard. I was wrapped up in it all of a sudden. I met some amazing people after I arrived here. I wound up dealing with celebrities. I dealt with just all sorts of wonderful things, and people who had been on the mountain, people who'd written books, which prompted me to write a book or two or three. And there was just so much that I had to learn, and I just soaked it up like a sponge. I want to tell you that you're invited to come out here and visit Arizona. I've had so many comments from folks out there from all over the planet. You're welcome to come out here and enjoy some of the adventures on your own. Superstition Mountain's still sitting there, just like she always was. On a final note, I would personally like to remind everyone wanting to make the quest to our area here in Arizona, and especially to Apache Springs. The unique thing about this ancient canyon is that it provides us with a peek into the past, and we can walk the quiet desert into an ancient art gallery created by people who walked the very same steps that we are now walking over 1,000 years ago. My trip was over 35 years ago, but ever since then, the mountain and its petroglyphs have remained beautiful and visible for all these many years. My hope is that when you go to visit, you too will appreciate and protect what you see and leave the scene just as you found it. And while you're at it, you might also want to ponder the thought that we still do today. We still don't know what these mysterious writings on the mountain have to say.